Good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking Ranking Member Chabot and committee members for joining us for this very important virtual forum. A normal day in Congress is beginning to take new forms as we continue to navigate through the COVID-19 pandemic. And I appreciate everyone's ability to adapt so that we can provide the relief, leadership, and oversight that we know millions of American small businesses are counting on. On March 27th, the CARES Act was signed into law. The act provided $275 million to small businesses, small business development centers, women business centers, their respective associations, and minority business development centers to meet the additional demands for education and counseling to small businesses during these unprecedented times. Congress set aside $25 million of those funds for the Association of Women's Business Centers and America's SBDC to consolidate COVID-19 information and coordinate training for counselors through an online platform. Now, over a month after the passage of the CARES Act, we have an obligation to examine what is and is not working, as well as gain a better understanding of how the CARES Act has been implemented on the ground. To help determine this, the committee staff conducted a survey of the lead small business development centers, the women's business centers, SCOA and minority business development centers across the country to gain insight into the experiences with the CARES Act and COVID-19's impact on their small business clients. While we are still awaiting some responses, the feedback has been informative. The responses reinforce what we have been hearing from the small businesses. The piecemeal rollout of guidance, coupled with inconsistent information, made it difficult for the resource partners to effectively advise small businesses. For example, SBDC counselors working with clients were unaware of a SBA policy that limited the economic injury disaster loan advances to $1,000 per employee rather than a flat $10,000 advance as defined by law, leading to much frustration among clients. Moreover, it is vital that SBDCs and WBCs have the resources they need to meet the additional counseling demands due to COVID-19 and delays in the disbursement of funding that is simply unacceptable. Finally, the CARES Act provided additional funds to provide services and resources in other languages. I am eager to hear from the resource partners about the materials or lack thereof they receive from SBA to help non-English speaking small businesses owners. The COVID-19 pandemic has upended nearly every aspect of our lives. As we continue the fight to flatten the curve and develop a vaccine, it is unclear when things will return to normal. During today's virtual forum, we will hear from our resource partners who work every day to support the small businesses in their communities. It will allow us to understand the best path forward through this pandemic and discuss ways to improve delivery of services in the face of uncertainty. With that, I would like to recognize Ranking Member Chabot for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for holding this virtual forum today. I know this is not the way we usually do things, so I'm sure there are going to be glitches here and there, and I'm guessing that I'm going to screw up somehow here and there as well. So I'll try to keep those to a minimum. But I want to thank you for doing this. And I also want to note in advance, depending on how long this goes, I have several other commitments relative to phone conferences. There's a conference that the Republicans have this afternoon. I'm also on the president's task force, and some of the other members may be as well in reopening America. So we have a phone call a little later on today, but hopefully those won't interfere with this. Yesterday, I sent a letter to Administrator Carranza urging the SBA to increase collaboration with resource partners and approved lenders to immediately address SBA funding awareness gaps among underserved businesses and communities. According to a recent survey on the impact of the CARES Act, small businesses may have missed out on initial PPP funds because of low baseline awareness and differential access to information, unquote. Many women and minority-owned small businesses faced significant structural challenges in establishing and maintaining their companies before the onset of COVID-19. And as a result, these small businesses require additional support to utilize resources effectively. To meet their needs, the SBA should prioritize its nationwide networks of resource partners to tailor information to local communities. The SBA was appropriated $265 million for entrepreneurial development programs outlined in Section 1103 of the CARES Act. Under Section 1103, grants to resource partners are to be used for education, training, and advising small businesses on various coronavirus concerns, including available federal resources. Congressional intent of this section is for SBA resource partners to facilitate small business access to CARES Act funding. I commend the recent launch of online resources by America's SBDCs, Association of Women's Business Centers, and SCORE. These websites and others and other outreach efforts provide opportunities to connect struggling small businesses to critical funding and resources. I appreciate the feedback collected from SBA's resource partners and appreciate their representatives here virtually today. I want to thank you and thank the organization's employees and volunteers for their dedication to America's small businesses. And there's no question that America's small businesses have been struggling through this coronavirus pandemic that we have all experienced and to some degree are continuing to experience. So I think that Congress and the administration did the right thing in passing the CARES Act and subsequent legislation. I personally think that we should be in Washington to continue the effort to save America's small businesses. After all, it was governmental action that shuttered many of these, most of the small businesses that are closed today. And to some, it clearly could threaten their very survival. So I think it's appropriate, since government shut them down, for there to be government action to help them. And that's why I support federal funding for the CARES Act and other legislation in the future, assuming that it's reasonable legislation and bipartisan and well-written and actually helps those small businesses, doesn't just shovel money out the door, but actually helps them so that they can recover and stay in business, and just as importantly, make sure that their employees continue to have a job. So thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this hearing, and I yield back.
The gentleman yield back. Thank you. I would like to take a moment to explain how this forum will proceed. Each panelist will have 5 minutes to provide a status update, and each committee member will have 5 minutes for questions. Please ensure that your mic is on when you begin speaking and that you return to mute when you finish. With that being said, I would like to thank again our resource partner leaders for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us today. We have with us Mr. T. Rowe, President and CEO of America's SBDC. Mr. Rowe has been with America's SBDC since 2009 And in that time, he has overseen a network of over 1,000 centers that provide low-cost training and counseling to small businesses nationwide. Mr. Rowe has been an invaluable resource to the committee in the past, and we are happy to welcome him here again today. Also, we have with us Ms. Corinne Hodges, CEO of the Association of Women's Business Centers. Ms. Hodges joined the Association of WBCs as CEO in January 2019 and has worked as a strong advocate for underserved and minority-owned small businesses since coming on board. Ms. Bridget Weston, acting CEO of SCORE. Ms. Weston has been with SCORE for the past 10 years, recently been elevated to acting CEO of the SCORE Association. Ms. Weston's in-depth understanding of the SCORE Foundation, its volunteers and clients, has served SCORE well as they actively improve and expand their services. With us also, Ms. Linda Womack, Director of the Minority Business Center in Tacoma, Washington. As Director of the MBDA's Tacoma Business Center, Ms. Womack is responsible for targeting on-the-rise businesses that are at least 51% minority-owned and providing them with technical assistance and strategic business advice to increase their competitiveness. And lastly, Ms. Amy Amoroso, Director of the Veterans Business Outreach Center for New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Ms. Amoroso is the initial point of contact for VBOC clients and works tirelessly to oversee and implement the Boots to Business and Boots to Business reboot training programs for the veterans in her territories, ensuring they receive the counseling and training needed for their businesses to thrive. Thank you all for being here, and I would like to begin with recognizing Mr. Rowe for 5 minutes. Welcome. Thank you. I think you need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, my apologies. That takes the pressure off of Mr. Shabbat since I've now screwed up first. Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to see all of you. It brings a welcome sense of normalcy back to my life. And I'd like to tell you that we've been working long hours at SBDCs and in response to the pandemic. And frankly, I did a quick poll of my membership, and all told, we've done close to a year's worth of work in the last 8 to 10 weeks. So far, it's not been unusual for our counseling requests to exceed several 100% of normal year over year. We've hosted and participated in over 3,500 webinars in the last 8 weeks and assisted over 315,000 people. And we put in about 235,000 counseling hours for 116,000 clients. So just to give you, that's basically a half a year's worth of counseling clients in 10 weeks. Now we've helped small businesses to date access just about $1 billion in financing. 992 million has come through. Though frankly, when you consider the pipelines, the number is probably well over that. And I'd like to point out that SBA's Office of Entrepreneurial Development has actually been a really good partner under trying circumstances. They worked with us to set up a funding allocation. We shifted the statutory allocation just a little bit to provide a little extra funding for the minimally funded states, the smaller states like New Hampshire, Vermont, or Wyoming, where they really needed a little more funding to help increase their outreach. And they streamlined the budget application process so that as of this date, we've got 91% of our notices of award out, and funding advances have already gone out to about a third of the networks. Not all of them could take the advance, but SBA reached out and offered a 25% advance to our networks if they wanted it. Unfortunately, some of their universities, frankly, weren't equipped to handle it or didn't want to handle it that way. They also worked with us to get our grant approval for the COVID information hub to us in quick order, and we got that hub up and running last week, and we're working now to develop the training platform. I would like to talk really quickly about the biggest problem our clients are facing. And that's something you mentioned, Chairwoman Velasquez, and that's conflicting information. A lot of conflicting and downright bad information came out, and that made our work a lot harder. And I think some of it was motivated by the best of intentions, parties trying to get information out in advance of agency guidance. And then that agency guidance, well, those concerns, the information came out, people were concerned, and it drove a lot of small businesses, I think, to make mistakes. And all that was compounded by a shortage of actual guidance from the agencies. What we've been trying to do at SBDCs is really help small businesses strategize, help them understand their options. There were a lot of great options in the CARES Act, but a small business would look at it and not necessarily understand the interplay between the Family and Medical Leave Act, EIDL loans, unemployment insurance changes, and the PPP loans. So what we were trying to do is help people strategize and use those tools most effectively. And unfortunately, changing guidance made strategizing a little bit harder than it should have been. And so now we're looking at how do we help small businesses get what they need as quickly as they can and get finished and get through this. And we look at this as 4 basic levels. Right now we're in response. The next level is going to be recovery, followed by resilience and reinvention. And that's our strategy for helping our clients, is moving them through responding to the crisis, recovering, rebuilding, and reinventing. Like I said, we're working like crazy, and we really appreciate the additional funding. We're going to be staffing up heavily throughout the nation. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. And now we recognize Ms. Hodges for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be with you today, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity to share the experiences of the 117 women's business centers across the country and their response during this difficult pandemic. I'd like to group my response or my comments today into 2 areas. The first being what we have found that is working well, and the second area being specific concerns that we have. As far as what's working well, we've certainly seen women's business centers step up and be effective as first responders. To characterize the kind of demand and the surge that's been experienced among women's business centers, we've seen 2 to 4 times typical volume and as much as 10 times volume as a typical first quarter or typical period in comparison to a typical year. Our women's business centers have stepped up during this time of crisis and have become effective navigators and have become subject matter experts in a variety of areas that are affecting our disadvantaged, both economically and socially disadvantaged small businesses. The other area where we are working very well is in collaboration. With SBA's Office of Entrepreneurial Development and OBO, we've put in extra effort, as have they, to ensure success with the Women's Business Centers navigating their additional CARES Act funding, but also lots of information that's been coming through the pike, constantly changing, allowing Women's Business Centers to be those subject matter experts in the area of SBA loans as well. In addition, I would nod to SBDC and another collaborative partner of ours, as we've been able to stand up the website, the covid-sb.org site, in probably unprecedented speed. And we look forward to the future phases of development of that project. For areas that we see are not necessarily working quite as well is obviously among the business community. And the overwhelming concern of the Women's Business Center clients continues to be lack of access to capital. That's the overwhelming concern. No matter which Women's Business Center you ask, that's the concern that rises to the top. They hold concern that the SBA funding will not reach many of their clients, and furthermore believe that there are concerns about the loan forgiveness aspects. There remain outstanding applications, lack of ability to check on the status of that, and then, of course, the likelihood of not receiving funding for some, if not many of them. The second area of concern among Women's Business Center clients, among the small businesses, is in this area of resilience. Certainly, many companies are concerned about the reduced sales and long-term sustainability of their business due to social distancing and this economic turndown. Small businesses are struggling with pivoting strategically to ensure their business resiliency during and post-pandemic. They're requesting technical guidance on transitioning to online platforms, marketing to consumers, and developing consistent messaging during and then post-COVID. So what we see there are opportunities for WBCs to continue to provide additional information, continue through the counseling, and continue to serve additional businesses that may not have otherwise been seeking the support of Women's Business Centers. So we appreciate the support of the CARES Act that has enabled us to expand the capacity to ramp up those centers, to be able to serve, in many cases, an annual surge in volume just within the first quarter. So with that, just thank you again for the support of this committee and the staff.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hodges. And Ms. Weston, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Velasquez, Ranking Member Shabbat, and members of the Small Business Committee. I am Bridget Weston, the acting CEO of SCORE, and it is a privilege to speak with you today about how SCORE is helping small businesses during this pandemic. Navigating the COVID-19 crisis is unprecedented and overwhelming for small business owners, and it helps to have trusted mentors who can provide guidance along the way. And SCORE's network of 10,000 nationwide volunteers has done just that. Through these volunteers, SCORE remains open for business, providing the mentoring, guidance, and education that are critical to the small business's survival and ability to thrive through this challenging crisis. Now more than ever, small business owners are relying on SCORE. And SCORE has pivoted to deliver our mission in this new all-virtual environment. We were able to adapt quickly thanks to our existing technological infrastructure, which we have used for years to successfully deliver virtual mentoring, online education, and events such as the National Small Business Week Virtual Conference, which we have co-hosted for the past several years with the SBA. By scaling up this infrastructure, our total services, which include mentoring and educational workshops, have increased 50% compared to this time last year. Now, it will come as no surprise to you that the most popular questions SCORE mentors are assisting our clients with fall into 3 major categories. The first and most urgent relate to the various funding options, such as the EIDL and PPP loans, which ones to apply for, help with preparing the application, and what the next step should be if funding is denied. The second issue relates to keeping customers, marketing, and how to pivot in this environment. The third major issue small businesses are concerned with today relates to human resources, mainly unemployment, and how to prepare to reopen based on the government guidelines. SCORE business mentors have proven to be as resilient and adaptable as the entrepreneurs they serve, moving local educational workshops that were in person online, staying connected with virtual tools, and providing 100% of our mentoring via technology tools that best meet the needs of our clients. SCORE recently launched a real-time mentoring platform that connects small business owners with a live business mentor for quick advice on topics including funding and finance, recovery and growth, e-commerce and technology, marketing and sales, and HR and operations. Clients connect with a mentor in the platform immediately via text response and can opt to continue the conversation via confidential video mentoring sessions with anyone in our nationwide network of volunteers. SCORE's real-time mentoring platform also hosts peer networking lounges for entrepreneurs to meet and discuss concerns with fellow business owners. The topics in these rooms center around COVID-19 recovery, startups, and women and minority entrepreneurs. Currently, the platform can afford to remain open on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Our Coronavirus Small Business Resource Center webpage is an informational hub for small business owners that offers educational resources on financing options and live and on-demand educational content designed to help small business owners survive and thrive during the COVID-19 crisis. SCORE has been able to develop new content from our mentors and partners to help enhance these educational resources. For example, we quickly modified our live webinar schedule to include coronavirus-specific content. And as a result, we saw an increase in live webinar attendance of more than 100% in April. Those webinars had more than 2,000 people per live webinar and included Q&As with live SCORE mentors and marketing advice to combat an economic downturn. Now, while SCORE did not receive any additional funding from the CARES Act, we have worked to raise funds through our corporate partners via the SCORE Foundation to support these efforts. With additional funding, we will expand platform availability, add content to help businesses reopen, provide more training for SCORE volunteers on best practices for mentoring and training virtually, and reach even more clients in underserved markets. SCORE remains committed to delivering our mission, and we want to thank you for the federal funding we have already received to support our efforts. I welcome any questions you may have, and thank you so much for your time and commitment to helping small businesses in our country.
Thank you, Ms. Weston. And now let me recognize Ms. Wotnak for 5 minutes. Yes, welcome. On mute.
Good morning. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I'd like to focus on is to say that there has been great collaboration between all the members that had just spoken on the panel, which is the SCORE, the SBDC, as well as the SBA. I think what is very unique to the MBDA Center is that there are 36 centers across the country, and most of us support at least 200 minority-owned businesses. But given the magnitude of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Tacoma Business Center collaborated with business centers throughout the U.S., as well as the SBDC and the SBA, to develop specific approaches and initiatives in anticipation of the severe destruction of normal business life. Our outreach program, with the provisions of services to support primarily to clients, but later in March, given the gravitude of the economic impact, we quickly expanded our services and scope and operations to service the broader business community, which included sole proprietors, independent contractors with revenues of less than $500,000. Normally in our program, our sweet spot is those who are doing at least $1 million, so that when we do offer these direct funded technical assistance, they'll be able to hire more people. But we did have to make that shift. And by the time we approached the filing deadline for the Paycheck Protection Program and loan submissions, we had over about 170 firms that reached out to us directly. And because the MBDA Center has been operating, the program itself for over 50 years, we're kind of seen as trusted advisors. And also what is unique about the program is that we do have subject matter experts on contract with us, which is the CPAs, bookkeeping, and legal. Because the speed was the most important aspect of applying for the SBA and the EIDL and the PPP application process. So our work has focused addressing the unique challenges and the devastating consequences that is the pandemic that has brought throughout the minority-owned communities. Through the provisions of technical assistance to small businesses, that I've already outlined, and the paramount business needs during the onset of the disease was a continued access to capital. So what we noticed early on is that the larger banks, after the second day the SBA had opened up the application process, were not accepting applications. So we immediately contacted community-based lenders and CDFIs and directly referred clients to them after we had done the initial financial assessments. The top obstacles: lack of SBA funding available for resources that have filed for bankruptcy or the formerly incarcerated persons, lack of understanding of the requirements for sole proprietorships and independent contractors. And this issue was later resolved, but federal credit unions not accepting applications. Those are the obstacles. The top complaints: small businesses needed more time to access their accounting information. SBA and banks did not provide mechanisms to track the status of the applications. So we would get continual calls and asking, can you reach out to our lender to see where our application's at? I have number 036. Does that mean that I still qualify? Those were a lot of the questions. Also, concerns that the funds may not arrive timely, and we're still getting a lot of inquiries where they have received the PPP, but not the EIDL package. Uncertainty of the process for forgiveness and future debt obligations, and then constant changing of rules and requirements. Some of the other unique challenges were, lack of access to affordable broadband because they had to shift from a brick and mortar going into the office to the home office environment. Lack of updated, computer systems. Common complaints were my computer doesn't have an up-to-date, a camera and whatnot. And also the language specific services, because we do serve specifically minority-owned enterprises. But what I'd like to say is just being on the ground, there's a lot of word about pivot, and I'd like to give you an example of what we have done in terms of pivoting.
Ms. Womack,
Yes.
time has expired.
Oh,
but
I'm
when
sorry.
we go to the question and answer period, you might be able to expand on any information that you have not been able to share with us as of yet.
Okay, thank you so much.
And now we recognize Ms. Amoroso for 5 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairwoman Velasquez, and thank you for inviting me to participate in your Small Business Committee virtual forum today. As you know, VBOX did not receive the direct funding from the CARES Act. There are 22 VBOX covering our nation and territories, assisting our veterans, military spouses, and service members, starting or expanding their businesses. We have been working tirelessly virtually around the clock, answering phone calls, presenting webinars, and emails to inform and respond to our veteran clients and stakeholders. To this extent, our center alone has been able to reach almost 10,000 additional clients since COVID-19 happened. We transitioned to become a virtual office on March 16th, 2020. We had to expand our working hours to include nights and weekends due to the current pandemic to answer the calls of our veterans. Our clients have appreciated being kept informed on continual changes to the CARES Act and quality of life checks, which is provided by pretty much the entire VBOC organization. We have worked closely with our SBA district offices, as well as our resource partners, including the Small Business Development Centers, the Women Business Centers, SCORE, PTAX, USDA, New York State OGS's 6% set aside for SDVOSBs. And we understand the value of collaboration, specifically in the time of crisis, and that each organization promotes and delivers value to our clients differently and effectively. Internally, our SBA OVBD team schedules weekly calls to brief the VBOCs on all activities, both past, present, and future. We receive emails daily on activities and access to capital that we share and disperse to our clients and stakeholders. VBOCs, along with SBA, provide the Boots to Business classes on transition military bases. When COVID-19 happened, we had to make some appropriate changes and to make that pivot. To date, I am proud to state that we have successfully executed 4 Boots to Business programs with VBOC directors working together to deliver this curriculum through a virtual platform provided by the Department of Defense's SFL TAP. Over these last 6+ weeks, we have taken notice and notes as we have helped clients explore their access to CARES Act funding. We have tried to ease the worries of our veteran clients and have applied or who have applied or tried to apply and either received no funding or were turned down. Most veteran business owners understand that during a time of crisis, things change quickly, and sometimes a pivot is needed, as we've experienced with the CARES Act. Most understand these processes due to their military and past experiences. With that said, we have identified some change and uncertainty that our veterans have faced. And here's some of our examples. Some banks have declined small businesses if they were not existing customers. We train our clients on the value of assembling a bail team, which includes the banker, accountant, insurance, and lawyer. They need to establish these relationships and get to know their team when they start a business. Maybe if these clients had established these relationships before the crisis hit, some of these pitfalls could have been avoided, and something that we can really enhance their experience on in the future. Our sole proprietors and independent contractors and home-based businesses have had issues with the funding process as they had to wait an additional week before they could apply. They received information from lenders stating that due to their lack of payroll and supporting documentation, the PPP will not be processed for them. Some have stated that the PPP does not give businesses enough money for non-payroll expenses such as overhead, operating costs, and rent. Their employees are making more money on unemployment, and for that reason, they do not want to return to work. Business owners ask where to access additional capital. They need a good workforce starting now to sustain that workforce for months ahead. They also worry that they will not have enough customers or clients once they're able to reopen. As we know, each state will have its own rollout for opening back up. New York is a little different with our governor rolling out a 4-phase plan of industries that can open. Some of these businesses will not even be able to open until late fall or early winter, and the 8-week forgiveness and the 6-month deferment will not work for them. Many business owners are very interested in the EIDL loan and are prepared to apply. They like the rate and the term. They just wish it had been around longer and they had better access to it. The first round of applications was a bit rough. The second, much easier and available, but the availability of those funds ended too abruptly. Now the waiting game continues for when it will reopen and if it will apply to all industries. And with the negative comes the positives. On a positive note, opening the PPP applications to be offered at community banks, minority lenders, PayPal, Square, Intuit has helped our clients that did not have the ability to apply at a traditional bank for other reasons. This has paved a way for multiple clients to secure additional funding. I have many success stories highlighting some great experiences within the PPP, the EIDL, and the Advance. One includes Kaiser Global. It's a public-private partnership located in New York State that develops advanced computing research centers and is devoted to new scientific collaborations. They received $20,000 from the PPP. Another, Superior Co-op HVAC, had received $5,000 from the EIDL Advance. In closing, the CARES Act funding has been valuable to many and challenging for others to access. We know there will be many more challenges ahead as the country recovers from this pandemic and economically as well. If we stand as one nation and remain united to help our small businesses succeed, we need to provide a funding platform that can be accessible to all, easy to apply for, easier to receive and pay back, and that will be fair and just. We are proud to be an SBA resource partner. VBOCs will continue to be here to support and empower our veterans and military members throughout their entrepreneurial journey and throughout these changes that are reshaping our world. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chairwoman.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Amoroso, and thank you to all the members of the panel for your insightful, important information. Let me say this has been an unprecedented crisis, and we don't know when this is going to end, but we do know that we must come together to provide the kind of guidance that is important and the resources that are needed for our small businesses to be able to survive. This is a lifeline, and we must make sure that in order for the resources to work, we have to provide clear guidance. Mr. Rowe, you said that that is one of the issues that has affected this process in terms of a piecemeal rollout guidance and conflicting information. Ms. Weston, you mentioned the fact that many of your clients were confused as to what financial option worked for them, whether it was the PPP or the EIDL program. Then the other issue is still we don't have rules or guidance on certain aspects of the PPP. So how could anyone, a business, could make a decision as to whether or not, if they own a restaurant, the PPP will work for them? Still, we're waiting for the forgiveness rules, guidance, and that is a key component of the PPP. How could you incentivize for the use of this as a financial tool? So, Mr. Rowe, going forward, what do you think in terms of processes and rules is still lacking to make this a more easier process for both businesses and borrowers to navigate?
Wow, a lot of things. Frankly, the EIDL program has to stop being a black hole of information. We have too many clients out there who have no idea of the status of their loans, whether their applications were proper or not. They don't have any idea where they are. And, well, you know what happened with when they shifted the guidance to making the advance based on your number of employees. Well, I can understand why they made the change, because they saw several million applications and a limited amount of funding. But you have to be straightforward, admit to the issue, and explain your actions. Instead, we found out about this literally because it was leaked out in emails, and SBA district directors were in the same position. You can't do it that way. If they're struggling, if they've got 4 million applications and they don't have enough staff, come forward, admit to it, and move forward from there.
Do you know how many applications are in the system in terms of the EIDL?
I have no idea, but I'm
4
guessing.
million.
Yeah, I'm
4
guessing
million.
it's about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just now, ma'am, just as an example, there's an article in the Washington Post today that says SBA is going to cut the amount available in EIDL to $150,000. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but SBA, by not addressing it and saying, no, that's not correct, the Washington Post is wrong, or at least coming out and saying, yes, it's correct, and here's why we're doing it. But right now, all we've got is a rumor mill on the internet.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Womack and Ms. Amoroso and Ms. Weston, we, on the second round, we carved out $60 billion for CDFI, for credit unions, for micro lenders. Do you think that provided a path for so many who were left behind to be able to access capital? And do you think that in any new round, we should bring make sure that we bring mission-based lenders who has a closer relationship and deep ties with the community that they serve.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely. We realized early on that that was the way to go. And yes.
Okay.
I agree as well. I agree. I think, the ones that kind of slip through the cracks that might not have an ingrained relationship with a banker, some use USAA, which, as you know, is not a business lender specifically for our veterans. Opening up community lenders was really what gravitated them, what pulled them towards them and really gave them that step forward. So yeah, absolutely 1,000%.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I have to agree. And what we had heard in the first round was that if the small business didn't have a relationship with one of the big banks, they were shut out. And so opening it up, having that allocated to the banks and the lending institutions that true small business owners have access to is definitely a great way to go.
Thank you very much. My time has expired, so now I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Shabbat.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Rowe, let me start with you if I can. One of the things that the CARES Act did was to put on top of the unemployment that each state provides for those employees that have unfortunately become unemployed, $600 on top of that. There was some concern in advance about that amount and exactly how it was implemented, et cetera. What have you been hearing from small business owners that you've dealt with relative to that issue? Are there concerns that have come up, or just what's been your experience?
There are some concerns that employees don't want to come back, and what that ties with is if you've got a PPP loan, the clock starts running the same day the money is dispersed into your account. So now you're an employer and you've got 8 weeks to pay people. If they don't want to come back, you're sitting there wondering what to do. We have clients out there who are giving back PPP loans because they're looking at the situation and saying, I can't reopen my business. The clock is ticking on this loan. And my employees are actually, happy on unemployment. Why would I pay them? And I can't reopen my business anyway. So it's really quite a quandary for a lot of our clients.
Okay, thank you. Another issue that we've heard from a lot of businesses all across the country is the issue a taxable issue or not. And recently, of course, there's been an IRS Treasury ruling essentially saying that to continue to claim business expenses and that would be a double deduction. So you can't do that. Any of the witnesses today, would you want to shed some light on that, or if you're hearing from some of the folks that you've been dealing with?
Honestly, with a lot of our clients, the tax issues haven't even risen to the level of concern yet.
Okay.
They're still so concerned about other things that they're not even thinking about their tax bill that'll be due next year.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And with any of the folks that you all are dealing with, has the issue come up relative to the fact that people had to certify in good faith that they actually needed the money, and obviously due to the impact that the coronavirus pandemic has had on that business, lost income, lost business, a whole range of things. Are you hearing from the people that you deal with on that issue? And would any of the witnesses be fine? Mr. Rowe, you want to take that?
I can't say that I know of any of our clients that have that issue because they're all being affected one way or another, particularly with the lockdowns going on state by state.
Thank you. And then finally, this legislation obviously was passed in record time. Down at the signing ceremony, that was on a Friday. The next week, literally, community banks and credit unions were in the process of issuing loans. None of the money had gone out the door yet, but within a week, they're actually working on that. And at this point, a lot of the money's already gone out the door, so we're not sure if there's going to be a phase 4 or what it might look like. Are there recommendations? I don't have a lot of time left at this point, but if the panelists would like to provide some of those recommendations to members of the committee, I think we would be happy to receive that. And I think I'm just about out of time at this point, so I'll yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentleman is correct. Time has expired. And now we recognize Ms. Finkenauer. Unmute your phone.
I think I got it. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. And it's so great to see so many faces. And thank you so much to the panelists here today, too, and the work you've been doing within our communities, working with these small businesses who we know are hit so hard right now and are very worried about their future. And we've got a lot of folks worried about their livelihoods. We understand that. And it's partly why I know for me, it's been so important to play oversight here when it comes to these dollars that have gone out and how they're actually getting out into our communities and if they are actually reaching the folks who we know need it most. And I know so many of you on this call are the ones working directly with the folks who do need it most. And so one thing that I brought up in our last committee hearing, and I think is worth bringing up again because it's been talked about with our panelists here today, are those dollars that went to our community-based financial institutions, specifically the $60 billion and the last blessing up of the program. To be frank, I'm worried that wasn't enough. I'm still worried that when we're looking at the access to, again, for those smaller financial institutions, that they have those limits, those lending limits as well of how much they can lend out. We were hearing stories this week from some of our credit unions who said they had folks coming to them who typically bank with other bigger banks and were completely shut out of the program. So they went to them instead, and they were able to work with them and get them those loans. I think they said one of my credit unions had over 100 loans were under $1,000 or less, because that's how much, again, sometimes it's a little bit that can really keep folks going. And again, I'm worried that so many folks who really have needed it have been left out of this. So if anybody can touch on that in a bit as well, that would be helpful. I also want to touch on and hear anybody. I know Ms. Womack, I heard you touch on this about the need to invest or the issues that we've had some of our small businesses face because of the lack of digital connectivity. I represent Eastern Iowa, where we have, it's a very rural district, and I also am chairwoman of rural development, ag trade, and entrepreneurship. And we've had people come and testify about the fact that lack of connectivity has been an issue. And now, given this pandemic and the way that folks have had to go online, it's just really exacerbated that. So would you be able to touch on that too, about why that's important that we continue to pay attention to that on a good day, but especially during a pandemic? And again, why those community financial-based financial institutions are so important here, and that we get this lending right. Oh, shoot. Linda, I think you're on mute.
Yes.
God, I keep forgetting. With smaller banks and community-based relationships mean everything, and so this is where we're able to, make that connection for them. And, it's about getting to know them and making small loans and incremental and then going, for larger amounts. But in terms of broadband, it's just, especially in the sole proprietor businesses, there's a lot of construction and agribusinesses, and they're used to a brick and mortar, so they're investing their money in one sense, and now they have to go completely digital. it's just, they just didn't have the finances for that. And so what we had to do was speed is the most important thing in terms of applying for these. Mm-hmm. And if they're waiting for that and they don't have the technology, then they're kind of last in line. And that's the issue.
One thing, I know I have a minute left here. One thing I wanted to touch on to just see if you have agreement of this. We have heard in the news, there have been companies that have taken advantage of this. We've heard some horror stories, ones that get started after the pandemic hit, just to be able to get loans. And for me, that just underscores why we really have to play oversight with these dollars and get the dollars back that have been wasted or the ones that have been taken advantage of and reallocate those to the businesses who are sitting in line who desperately need them. Is that something that you guys think would be a good idea?
Please, absolutely. Oh, I got to do that. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, please, absolutely. And I think when you guys made the, Congress to say, hey, look, you need to focus on more of the community base and those smaller businesses, those were instrumental in, especially getting the PPP. And I can tell you multiple stories of where they've reached out to us and said, thank you so much. That, mandate was critical and crucial. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Time has expired. And now we recognize the gentle lady, Ms. Radewag.
Thank you, Talofa. Thank you, Chairwoman Velasquez and Ranking Member Shabbat for holding this forum. And I want to thank the panel for your informative presentations. And special thanks to all of the staff for pulling this all together. I have no questions at this time. I want to just extend my appreciation and gratitude to all of you. And I'm just delighted to be here. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Golden, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over the past several weeks, I've actually held a number, probably about 7 or 8 teletown halls with small business owners here in Maine's 2nd Congressional District. And I'll tell you, we've had amazing participation, probably in excess of 11,000 participants overall. And I just wanted to share that with you because it really drives home a simple point for me, which is how hungry people were for timely, accurate information as they were trying to make business decisions about what to do in the midst of this crisis, wondering, is it the EIDL program or the Paycheck Protection Program? Mr. Rowe was talking about some of the other important provisions in the CARES Act, and small business owners were just so desperate and hungry for information, which is why the fact that the CARES Act money, the $275 million set aside for SBDCs, WBCs, for the MBDCs, taking so long to get out, I think was unfortunate because you're all so perfectly situated to be pushing out that helpful information to the small business owners that need it most. I also think it was an oversight not to send some money to the VBOX into the SCORE program as well, and I hope we can do something about that. Mr. Rowe, I wanted to talk with you a little bit. In 2018, SBDCs in Maine supported over 1,500 existing businesses, helped create 136 new ones, and helped create or protect more than 800 jobs. And I have no doubt, as you've said, that they have probably done a year's work in the past few months. And as you know, I sponsored the legislation that passed the House last October, got 375 bipartisan votes to reauthorize the SBDC program. And I wanted to point out to the committee today how important it is that the Senate pass this bill in this Congress. And I hope that the chair and ranking member and all of my colleagues will join me in calling on the Senate Small Business Committee to do that. And I would say that it should be the case for all of our SBA resource partners. It's just so important, I think, to reauthorize these programs and make sure you get the funding you need to help our small businesses. I've been hearing a lot of feedback about fear and anxiety that's out there because of the lack of information around forgiveness on the PPP program in particular. People are very concerned about the monthly payment if they don't get that loan forgiven. The 75-25 rule also difficult. And so I wanted to ask Mr. Rowe, okay, so feedback that you've been hearing from your SBDC leaders around the country. What's the top concern with the PPP program today, and what should Congress do about it?
Well, I think one of the big concerns, I was just actually talking with Mark Delisle, who's the state director in Maine, and he's got a concern, and I don't think it's unwarranted, about the way they're handling seasonal employees. They just shifted the window, if you will. And the problem with that is, as you well know, seasons are a little different between California and Maine. So seasonal employees in California, they may be on now, but in particularly as a client who has a blueberry picking operation, he's got 2 or 3 employees on right now, but he'll have 15 in a couple of months. And he applied for the loan, and now he's sitting there, and he's probably going to give the funds back and then hope he can apply again later. It's confusion like that I think, honestly, when I look at what all of our folks say, extending the application of the PPP funds, opening that window up so if you've got the loan and you're not ready to open yet, you can extend that deferral. That would, I think, make a lot of difference to a lot of small businesses.
That's very helpful. I'd also say we are also a winter tourism state, and we have people who started with a lot of employees at businesses around Maine that actually downsize as they go towards the summer, and they've been pushed away from this program as well because of the inflexibility of the program, which is treating all businesses as though they're in the same situation, even though we know some are operating, some are deemed non-essential and closed. And it's very difficult that the program lacks flexibility, in my opinion, although I think it's been very helpful, no doubt. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, so just yell at me, Madam Chair,
Time has expired.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And now we recognize Mr. Kern. Evan?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. It's great to be here. It's great to be talking on something that's really passionate to me, as small businesses have been a small businessman for over 35 years. You know, one thing I think, you know, it's easy to always Monday morning quarterback all of these things, but remember, we're stuffing about 15 to 20 years worth of work in about 5 weeks into the SBA. And so I think we all need to recognize that. And I know we do. We're just trying to point out things that need to get better. I will say, going back to the chairman's position on this letter that went over to Secretary Mnuchin, it is important that we understand how these expenses are going to be taxed or not taxed, whether it's now or at the end, because if Senator Ron Johnson talks about his forgiveness plan, it's going to be paramount whether he's talking about revenues or net incomes on the percentage of based on the forgiveness. So I think we need to get after this sooner rather than later. And I know that Chairman Grassley and certainly others are talking to them. You know, one thing we ought to encourage as we continue to move out, and you know, some of the lesser impacted areas, businesses, if they think they're going to have excess funds, we should encourage them. We should put an encouragement out to get those funds brought back in to the program so that they can be reallocated to other places. There's still hot spots while we're waiting on another round or whatever we're going to be doing there. I think what we've learned this past week, I know my office was pushing hard for these monies that are being brought back now by May 14th to be put back into the program as opposed to going back into Treasury so that they can be allocated to continuing these smaller size loans as we're seeing in this second round. And, you know, we've talked a lot about the $1,000 loans, and I know one of my colleagues mentioned that, but or I'm saying one of the witnesses talked about a $1,000 loan, or maybe even $2,000. I think it was Abby mentioned that. One of the issues, as you all know, the way the fee structure is set up, it's based on a percentage of the loan. So maybe what we should do is try to allocate, you know, more of this opening, if you will, to more of the micro lenders so that they can exercise these in some of the automated processes like through Intuit or others, Quicken or things like that, where we can get these loans processed much quicker, where they're they're more automated as versus people driven, because we all know this, but when you're getting some of our other traditional lenders, it takes the same amount of time. I've seen these loans being processed. It takes the same amount of loan to process a $10 million loan as a $1,000 loan. So they're trying to, force people into getting these things done. So we've got to figure out how to make this for these other people that are businesses as well. So I think the micro lending is a great place to do this. Maybe even further segmenting where these loans can go. $10 billion banking or institution that's a very large community bank. 50 billion and under. There's the largest bank in Oklahoma is 32 billion. So we probably need to segment that down even further. And then lastly, I'd like to say to Mr. Rowe, if you could just give us some of the examples of some of the exciting things that you've been able to do with the monies that you've got from the CARES Act and how those opportunities, you've talked a lot about fine tuning, but some of the success stories you've seen and what you've done with the SBDC.
Well, actually, Mr. Hearn, what we've done is we've gotten some of the funds from the CARES Act out to the networks. Really what we've been doing is helping our clients pivot. We've got a great client in San Antonio. They've switched from their Dixie flag. They switched from making flags to making masks. We've got distillers like Tango Hotel in Indiana. They've switched to making hand sanitizer. That seems to be more important than rye right now. So we're working on things like that. But the other thing we're doing is building better relationships. And for example, in Maine, our SBDC there is partnering with the SCORE, the VBOC, and the Women's Business Center to basically be a consortium because they felt that was just the best way to maximize resources. And we're hoping to spread that effort.
Time has expired, and now we recognize Mr. Kim.
Hi, thank you so much for pulling this together, Chairwoman. I wanted to just jump right in here. A lot of us have been relaying the concerns from different small businesses that we're hearing, and my colleague, Mr. Golden and others, a lot of us been holding these teletown halls with small businesses. I have as well. But I wanted to hear from all of you, what are the mechanisms by which a small business can relay their concerns back to the SBA and to Treasury? I'm just trying to get a sense of, with all this frustration that's out there, what are some existing tools, if there are any, that really are able to get that back into the system so these agencies can try to adjust or supplement their areas with additional guidance. So I just kind of wanted to open that up initially.
Well, this is Bridget Weston, the CEO of SCORE. I'll start. With our nationwide network of 10,000 volunteer mentors, they're talking to small businesses every day and hearing their frustrations that we've been talking about. And our SCORE chapters have great relationships with their SBA district offices. So they are relaying that information that they are hearing from their clients to their local counterparts at the SBA. And then we are doing the same thing at the national level. We regularly connect with the SBA OED office and consolidate what we are hearing from our volunteers, our leaders in the field, and sharing that back with the SBA and making sure that those lines of communication are open on a regular basis.
Great. No, that's helpful to hear. I mean, I guess just kind of drilling into this, maybe, Ms. Hodges, we can turn to you for a question. I'd heard from some of the other panelists about how these the shift towards community banks and credit unions, that these tools were helping to put some guardrails in to make sure that the support got to some of the businesses that were most vulnerable, ones that really needed it. While it certainly seems like that's something that needs to continue on as we're able to do more support. But do you have any suggestions of other types of improvements here that we can make, other types of ways in which the way in which we structure the delivery could potentially better target some of the businesses that you engage with?
Yeah, well, I thank you for the question. And I would say that it seems that we have to answer this question fairly blind. In other words, we don't seem to have enough data about the demographic characteristics of those who are receiving these loans. And so that's really one of our concerns. I'm fairly ignorant about banking policy, and I understand that there are some restrictions on asking for certain information on the front end of a loan, but it certainly would be conceivable to collect some of that type of information after a loan is distributed, if not from a mainstream bank, a large commercial bank, or even from some of the smaller and maybe more alternative institutions. For us, it's just as useful to think about set-asides as it is the mechanism for delivery, if that makes sense. But we just need data, and we need data ongoing. We sort of need it now. We need data, I think, on a weekly basis. And I think you as decision makers need to know what that looks like.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I know the chairwoman has been very strong in pressing for more and more data to drive our next steps here. Last one, just real quick for Mr. Rowe, you had started talking about seasonal businesses and about that shifting the time window. That's one aspect of which I understand the impacts. I got shore towns in my community here in Jersey. We've got farmers as well, lots of blueberry farmers as well, just like what you were mentioning. What are some of the other things that we should be looking out for when it comes to seasonal businesses, interacting with these? Is there anything else that you wanted to flag for us?
Well, one of the things I'd really suggest is, as some of these lockdowns continue, while we try to weather this and flatten the curve, we need to look at the interplay between EIDL and PPP. It's confusing to a small business, and I think both should be there to be accessed. Because in a lot of situations for a small business, rent is a far more important issue than your payroll. It's a bigger chunk of your operational costs, particularly in a seasonal business. Let's say you have an ice cream parlor that's only open on the boardwalk for 3 months. It's rent that's what's costing you the most. But the relationship between EIDL and PPP is a little confusing.
Thank you. Time has expired, and now we recognize Mr. Stover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate being here. Just got a few questions, and it's directed at any of you folks. A couple of them. Do you believe our small businesses are ready to reopen, or have they been threatened by the idea of liability, i.e. lawsuits? My first question. And then as we look for the enhanced packages, do you think that our small businesses, because when we open up, they're going to take gradual steps? What in the CARES package or what other relief can we give them during those small steps building up to where they were prior to the pandemic? And then once we get after those two questions, I've got one more. So any of you could answer that question, please.
Yes. Can you hear me? This is Linda Womack from the MBDA. Please increase the time allowable for them to, spend the PPP. I think there's a 3-month limit that they have to spend, and so that they have to use the funds by, and it's specifically for payroll. So if you can lax those, ceiling, that would be very helpful for the small businesses.
We all agree on that.
And just quickly, and as they switch from brick and mortar, a lot of them need education, broadband. Affordable broadband will be very important because, as we know, 90% of the market is outside the U.S. They need to look at other areas to sell. And this is where social media, their whole branding strategy is important. And technology it is the way, that they'll be able to make this happen. So we see that balance between the brick and mortar and then the online. So that's the reason why broadband is crucial, affordable crucial.
Sure. A very good point. So, but have you heard about the concern of businesses opening up and the liability or the potential for litigation during this? And what is your suggestion? I see you nodding your head. So what is your suggestion to us from what you're hearing?
They need more timeline. There's a confusion in terms of when they need to spend the money down. Also, in terms of health, they just need more clarification, and they differ from state to state.
Okay, so I'm talking about when they open up.
Mm-hmm.
When they open up, you said they need more timeline. Are you saying stay closed until who are they asking for the the recommendation? CDC or in our case, the Minnesota Department of Health?
No, it usually comes from the state, the governor from us, from the governor. So I think they just need the clarification. Is it the Department of Health or is it the state? The governors of the state. So I think just more clarification as they gradually open up.
Okay, so let's say they open up fully. Are you hearing some concerns? I'm asking you if you.
Oh yes, they're scared. If people if the infection rates go up, will I be sued? I mean, will I be put in jail? I mean, these are valid concerns.
Yeah, and do you have a recommendation from your perspective on what we need to do in that any type of language that we should put, or your ideas to put in the additional relief package, if there is one, on how it should be worded? Because if they're scared, they may not open up, or one lawsuit will if they follow minimum standards, one lawsuit is concerning. And by the way, many businesses have cameras. So when you're in litigation, one of the first things they do is ask for the cameras, and many people save them for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, depending on the state statute. So I think you're going to see that. So give me some ideas, or give the committee some ideas to bring back during that package, please.
I will give that a little bit more thought, and then I'd like to talk to the businesses on the ground to see what their concerns are, because we've just been so focused on the application process and pivoting their business. But in terms of if you're opening tomorrow, what are your concerns? So I will be happy to get that to you.
Yeah, and thank you. And that's particular about the litigation.
Okay, understood.
Madam Chair, how much time do I have?
And the staff, I cannot control the time from here.
About a minute.
Okay. And then I just want to make sure that as we go through this PPP, and if there's going to be additional monies, that we work on making sure that those small mom and pop shops in each of our communities gets the opportunity for some of this relief. I'm hearing that some of our bigger, corporations and what have you, we all know that the mom and pop shops matter, and they define our community in some respect, and they're the economic engine. So, Madam Chair, I would just say you and the ranking member just assure there's some type of language that our small mom and pop shops are as important and critically important. So, with that, I will yield back and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Time has expired. And now we recognize Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Chairwoman Velasquez and Ranking Member Shabbat, for holding this virtual forum on such an important topic to small businesses across the country right now. And I know that Congress is doing what we can to conduct our business, and I'm glad to see that our committee is doing just that virtually. So the SBA Entrepreneurial Development Program has always served as an important resource for small businesses across the country. It's even more important now. We're hearing that today. I know the Small Business Development Center and Women's Business Center here in the Kansas 3rd Congressional District have been an invaluable resource for Kansas small businesses in navigating the loan applications, getting through whether it's the EIDL or the Paycheck Protection Program. One of the main concerns that I'm hearing, I've heard this from my colleagues today, is that small business owners are seeing delays in receiving loans, getting through that application process, and that these loans and programs were designed to be the first source of federal relief to small businesses. But so many of the small businesses here in Kansas and in this district have been incredibly frustrated by the process. I appreciate my colleagues highlighting that as well today. Of course, the PPP was intended to keep employees on the payroll and ensure that small businesses can pay their rent and utilities so that they can reopen their doors when it's safe to do so. But lenders and borrowers have cited some serious issues and complications with the slow release of guidance from the SBA and Treasury. And it's led to confusion and delays. And that's clear from the members and from our resource partners that we're talking to today. And I think we could probably have an entire hearing about the reports of the large chains or publicly traded companies that have been accessing these programs when so many small businesses, mom and pops, as my colleague called them, have not been able to. And that's, one of the reasons that I've called for SBA and Treasury to release the full list of approved PPP loans. I know a lot of folks have been looking at how we can conduct further oversight here. But one of the things I'd like to hear from the panel on is what patterns are you seeing in the kinds of small businesses that you serve that have not been able to access the PPP loans, and then particularly around the minority-owned and women-owned businesses. Ms. Womack, would love to hear you speak to that. I know. Probably all of you are seeing these things.
Your mic on mute.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thank you. The small businesses that have less than 8 employees, say less than 10 employees, and then more than 50% say went on unemployment. That's the concern. They just need to still understand the technical understanding of what does it mean for them, because then it affects the 1,000 per employee. So it's just kind of for them to juggle. Do I bring them on? Is this going to impact my later on the 75% forgiveness, ratio, things of that nature. So that's what the small businesses are concerned about. And many have been successful in the second round working with the smaller, community-based lenders. But those who applied early on with larger banks are still waiting.
I may be able to shed some light as well on some of the clients we're seeing in the women's business centers. With service-based businesses being such a tremendous percentage of the women-owned businesses, they tend to have employees that may have high turnover. The employee count may change, and so those can be gap areas. Another area that we've seen struggles in particular are with newer businesses. So when calculating the eligibility for PPP, it's important that the business be established. And so I would say that both service-based and then the newer businesses tend to kind of fall through the cracks.
Thank you for that. I know I'm short on time. I just want to say how appreciative I am of the work that you all are doing to help our small business owners stay afloat, keep their doors open. And thank you so much. With that, I yield back.
The gentle lady yields back, and now we recognize Mr. Burchett for 5 minutes.
All right, Chair Lady, can you see me? Am I on?
I cannot see you,
Wait a
but
minute.
I can hear you.
Can you? Okay, start my video. All right. My daughter deserted me, so I don't know how to. Can you see and hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank y'all so much. All my questions have been asked already, so I'll just take this opportunity to thank the members of the committee and the board folks that are joining us. And Chair Lady, we're so glad to see you're back in good health. We've been praying for you. And Ranking Member, it's always good to see you, sir. And with that, I will yield back. Oh, I would remind folks that are out, doesn't have anything to do with small business, but look in on some of your folks out there, especially your seniors who might be locked in. A phone call just means the world to them. So, and I'll yield back the rest of my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and now we recognize Ms. Chu for 5 minutes.
Yes. Thank you. Well, this question is directed at both Ms. Womack and Mr. Rowe and any other panelist that wants to weigh in. Ms. Womack, you did raise the language issue in your testimony, so I wanted to follow up. My district, like many across the country, is home to thousands of immigrants who own small businesses. And many of these individuals have limited English proficiency. which is why for several months now, this committee has gone to lengths to ensure that COVID-19 recovery services and materials will be provided in non-English languages. The CARES Act did authorize $25 million for the SBA to develop these materials, which they have yet to do. What we have seen so far is that respondents have generally stated that they received some materials in Spanish from the SBA, particularly info on the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and the Paycheck Protection Program application processes. However, a majority of the SBDCs, WBCs, and SCORE chapters rely on their staff to provide additional language services to their clients. For example, one SBDC stated that they offer Japanese and German language services to clients because of staff fluency. Some resource partners reported receiving no foreign language resources at all from SBA. Therefore, the language capabilities are uneven. So I would like you to speak to the capabilities you have to offer services and outreach in non-English languages, including Asian languages, and please expand on the resources you need most from Congress and from SBA headquarters to meet these needs. And Ms. Womack, I know you're under the Department of Commerce, but you certainly raised the importance of the language issue in your testimony. So if you could address it, that'd be great.
Thank you. We're still waiting on our funding, but I'm sure it is coming. But under the current business model, the languages that we had to do immediately and to create a frequently asked questions were Japanese, Cambodian, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, and Laotian. Those were, as historically they're underserved. And when they go online to do the SBA, the application, if their children don't do it, they realize that, they're the ones that needed the support. So what we would do is they would call and say, we need this section translated, which means interpretation as well as translation. So those are the capabilities that we have on the ground to these communities.
And they're official translations then?
Absolutely, through Language Dynamics or other certified government recognized, yes. Because if not, a slight nuance in language can make a big difference. And I guess just myself, coming from my mother's Korean, from an immigrant community, I understood it immediately, what those were the specific needs. And we have those resources on the ground to make that happen. But that's what the MBDA Center does very well, is just being able to, like you said, the word right now is pivot, but to pivot to the needs of the community.
Mr. Rowe?
Yeah, well, Ms. Chu, as you pointed out, SBDCs offer services in a variety of languages. I know, for example, we have a Vietnamese business center in California specifically, and throughout the nation, we just rely on our own resources to provide multilingual services to whomever needs it, whether it's the Vietnamese population in Louisiana or the Hispanic population in Colorado. We're just doing it ourselves because it seems like the best way to do it.
Steve, this is why it is so important to have official translations, because otherwise you rely on your staff to do it, and it's haphazard in terms of who actually is there with a particular language capability. And also, it is not certain that they have the official translation ability. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you so much, and I yield back.
Back, and now we recognize Mr. Bishop.
I want to thank Chairwoman Velasquez and Ranking Member Chabot and our panelists. Today's proceeding seems a lot like a committee hearing, and yet it's not in accordance with our rules, and it's sort of a poor substitute in some ways. As you all might be able to see, if my video is working, I'm in Washington because I believe we should be working for solutions for small businesses in the committee room behind me. Back in March, Speaker Pelosi said, "We're the captains of the ship. We're the last to leave." Well, we also should be the first aboard. We have a lot of work to do. As everyone on this call recognizes, small businesses need help. And I'll be in Washington until we come back into session, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. If anyone, Republican or Democrat, finds him or herself in Washington, I'd be happy to safely meet and work together on ways to help small businesses. And in this regard, the chairwoman, I think, is our inspiration because she's faced this illness, she's prevailed, and she's also proven in the earlier meeting that we had right here in this committee room that we can meet safely right here. As I look at the mission of the resource partners and the best practices for providing assistance, I think that I suppose that Zoom meetings are going to be difficult to replace face-to-face meetings. However, here we are. We're here, and I think we need to have a tough conversation on what we can do beyond funding programs that are fundamentally designed to help businesses in a face-to-face setting. And in some respects, some of the things we've talked about today that are being criticized, it kind of calls to mind the saying that we're straining a gnat while swallowing a camel, because shutting the economy alone produces uncertainty and confusion and really impossibility for a business to operate, it seems to me. And I'd ask a question to Mr. Rowe, if he can hear me. Wouldn't you agree that safely reopening our economy would be the biggest thing we could do to help small businesses, even more so than counseling them or even providing them a paycheck protection loan while they're shut down?
Well, yes, Mr. Bishop, I would. And I think that the key to that is the word safely. And that seems to be the area where everybody's having some disagreement. But I have to agree with you. I think every small business would rather be open and working with their employees.
You all are experts in small businesses, and the impression that I get is that every additional week that passes, every month that passes, with many small businesses having been shut down completely, maybe their revenues have dropped to zero. Isn't it true that as the longer this goes, the more small businesses will fail and not be able to reopen? And I would say maybe, Ms. Amoroso, you're nodding. What about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. The longer we keep them, underneath the stay inside order and not being able to get their businesses up and flourishing is a detriment, of course. But again, just like Mr. Rowe and you have stated, Mr. Bishop, is, we have to do it safely, and we have to find a way to get them to be safe, get back into the public, and then put those stipulations in place. Every governor will have their plan to roll out and how they want their businesses to open. And some put in place, masks or no business, right? No mask, no business, just like no shoes, no service. Right. Limit the intake to 10 or less that come into your establishment if you're maybe a restaurant or something along these lines. So there is definitely something that we can roll out, but most definitely the faster we can get our businesses out and reopened is a lot better for them than the PPP or anything else that we can do. And then of course, following up with their clients too, or customers, getting people to actually go and buy and getting out. That's the key.
Right. And one last point, business certainty, it seems, is a lot of what we're talking about. A business can't really function amid uncertainty. And some people got at, I think Mr. Stauber got at the question of liability. Shouldn't Congress, Mr. Rowe, take clear action to make sure that businesses are not subject to unexpected liabilities as this goes forward?
You're taxing my law school education, so trying to think about this. I think as long as there's due care exercised by the small business, they should be free of liability. This is one of those areas where, as long as it's like operating equipment. As long as you're operating it within guidelines and safely, you're covered, whether you're a crane operator or backhoe or whatever. And I think we have to think about this in the same way of having folks establish guidelines that small businesses can operate within as a safe harbor.
Thank you, Madam
Bishop,
Chairman. My time's
has
expired. Look forward to seeing you soon. Here
Thank
in
you.
Washington.
And now we recognize Mr. Vesey for 5 minutes. Mr. Vesey? Maybe he left. Okay, so now let's recognize Mr. Evans. On mute. On mute.
Let's see. I think I got it.
Now.
Can you hear me now?
Now. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for your leadership. I think this forum is perfect in the exchange and just understanding the implementation and what's going on. The question I want to ask is an issue I thought was somewhat moving towards the safety, because also in the CARES Act, there was money put for testing. And obviously testing is extremely important to entrepreneur as well as to customer. And not that we're asking the business to do it, but the reality of it is, each state is different in approaching. I know that in Los Angeles, they have a program that they implementing testing for the entire city, which obviously will benefit the small business. So can any of you speak to the issue around testing and tracing, things of that nature, which would have a huge effect upon what takes place with small businesses? Hello?
Any members of the panel who want to take on that question of testing?
So if no one has no thoughts on the issue of testing and relating to small businesses?
Well, this is Bridget Weston with SCORE, and I think it goes back to the previous questions we've been talking about, just making sure that the small business owners have the information and the resources to be able to do it effectively, make sure that they won't be, put in a bad position to then, if they do make mistakes or are unclear, we need to be clear with what the guidelines are, how they can meet them, and make sure that they have the resources in order to reopen safely and be able to follow whatever testing and guidelines there are for reopening and following the phases, whether it's state, local, or federal that are out there.
Okay. Well, I yield back to you, Madam Chairperson, then.
The gentleman yields back, and now we recognize Mr. Vesey.
Can you hear me okay, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay,
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I specifically wanted to ask, maybe someone from SCORE can help me. I know with some of the smaller businesses that some of the concerns that they had about the bill that we passed dealt with some of the rules at SBA and them changing and there being constant changing on the rules and what the guidelines were. I was hoping that you would be able to maybe touch on that a little bit. And then also like some of the rules that we put in place, for instance, like if the loan was going to become a grant, that it had to be based on previous employment. I know that there were some businesses that were concerned about that because obviously it's hard to it's hard to be able to say how something can apply from a year before to today. And again, right now, most businesses are going to be interested in how they can make a loan become a grant based on just what's happening in the economy. So was just hoping that you could just touch on that and maybe comment on how you think that maybe the SBA could tighten up some of the guidelines so they could be just a little bit more consistent and easier for some of our small businesses.
Sure, thank you for the question. And we do receive regular updates related to the changes and the rules that are the SBA is working on. And I do believe it is in an effort to make it easier and more understandable for the small businesses. So we share that information regularly with our volunteer mentors to make sure they have that. And I do think, there was a question earlier, what would it look like moving forward to help small businesses in navigating all of this? It would be great if there was, a tool that the small business could use to help identify which loan or grant or tax credit out there would be best for them, given their, what business stage they're in, what industry, what location. I think that would be something that would be really helpful for all small businesses and all resource partners, frankly, to have that available. In terms of the previous employment, I think it goes back to what Corinne was saying, that newer businesses are, struggling more than those that have been established for a while. And, we all want to help startups and those in the first 18 months. And because they don't have that background and that information for years past, they're just having a harder time finding the right resources. And I do think that what we're talking about on this panel is looking at the next steps and what can we all do as resource partners and as Congress to help those small businesses reopen safely and figure out how to move forward and get the clients back. It's not just about them opening their doors. It's about the general public being willing to go and interact with these small businesses.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Madam Chair, thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and now we recognize Mr. Schneider.
Hi. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to commend you, the Ranking Member Shabbat, and the committee staff for putting together this virtual forum. It is so critical that this committee actively exercise the oversight over the Small Business Administration as the agency disperses unprecedented billions of dollars in funding in the face of what were once unfathomable challenges small businesses face as a result of COVID-19. I want to thank you and the participants as well who join us today and who have shared their perspective and experiences in helping small businesses. In the face of this unprecedented challenge, Congress passed historic legislation, provided the SBA with funds to assist small businesses around the country. I have heard from countless business owners who have received assistance through the PPP and the EIDL loan programs, and this assistance will help them make it through these coming months. At the same time, however, I continue to hear from far too many small business owners who have either been unable to access our programs or who lack the guidance necessary to make full use of these funds. Earlier this week, I co-led with the Chairwoman Velasquez, and we were joined by 100 colleagues, including many members of this committee, in a letter to the SBA urging several critical changes to the current administration of the EIDL program. It's essential that the SBA establish a queue for new applications coming into the program, and for the millions of EIDL applicants who have yet to hear from the SBA, many who have waited weeks or even months, it is imperative that they hear from the SBA about the status of their application. Without knowing whether or not they can rely on the EIDL, if they remain in a black hole, as Mr. Rowe described, these businesses cannot plan for their long-term financial future. Also today, I want to reiterate the call for the SBA to accept new applications and update the current applicants on their status. I've heard from countless lenders and businesses on the SBA's role administering the PPP program, and I am glad many of the initial challenges are behind us. But the SBA has yet to provide PPP recipients guidance on how to fully qualify for loan forgiveness. Without this guidance, even if a business received PPP funds weeks ago, businesses are wary to spend a dime of these funds because they now cannot be assured that their loan will be forgiven. Let me repeat that. Without loan forgiveness, the funding they've received, they don't know how to use it. The Trump administration needs to wake up to the dire need to get these businesses the answers they deserve. As this committee continues to work to help small businesses weather through this historic crisis, we must understand that the situation will last longer than we anticipated. We must ensure businesses have the support beyond PPP's initial 8 weeks. For the many restaurants, hotels, and other businesses under the stay-at-home order, 8 weeks simply isn't enough time. Businesses will need longer to come back online and return to full health. I also want to say a quick thank you to Ms. Amoroso for her mention of the Boots to Business program. We know veterans are uniquely suited to be entrepreneurs, and this program has helped train more than 100,000 veterans in starting their own business. I have legislation that would codify this important program into law so that it can continue the success for many years to come. I want to thank you for your work helping our veteran entrepreneurs. As I noted at the beginning, we face unprecedented challenges and consequently unprecedented demands on Congress. A recent magazine article argued that our future economy will be more fragile, less innovative, and less fair. We in Congress have both the opportunity and the responsibility to ensure that our future economy and recovery is in fact strong, more innovative, and in particular for our small businesses, more fair. So with that, I appreciate you bringing this together. I appreciate our witnesses joining us today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. And with your intervention, we put an end to the questions and answer session, and we will move to closing remarks. Mr. Chabot, would you like to make some closing remarks?
Madam Chair, I just want to thank you for holding this virtual meeting. I think it went reasonably well, and I think the information that was conveyed to us and questions we were able to ask were helpful. I would encourage our committee to work together in bipartisan work. Which is one of the great things about the small business. Whichever party happens to be in the majority, the other party an opportunity to fully work with the party and actually get legislation passed in partisan.
Steve, I cannot hear you. I don't know if the other members are having issues, but I just can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm not, anyway, let me just wrap up by saying very much. We appreciate, I thought it was a great hearing, and we need to work together in a bipartisan manner and continue to do that, not go back.
Thank you. The gentleman yield back. And yes, as you said, we graduated today with this virtual forum. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the staff on Republican and Democratic side. You have done a marvelous job. And I was fearful about any glitches, but apparently it went quite smoothly. So let me also take this opportunity to thank all the panelists for your insightful information. You work very close with the small businesses that we care about. There is not a silver bullet to this crisis, but I do think that it takes more than just providing access to capital and putting together lending programs. It has to be address this pandemic in a comprehensive way. And even though Mr. Evans didn't get an answer to his question about testing, that has to be part of the whole solution, because businesses will not be able to do business if they cannot have customers to come through the doors. And here in New York, just today or yesterday, there was a survey that was released where the people, the public in New York City, are saying that it's too early to open the economy. So it takes more than just the programs that we're putting together. It takes a national strategy that will provide the confidence that we are on the right track when it comes to this pandemic. So let me thank all the panelists, and you are all to be commended for your commitment and dedication for helping small business during this crisis. And I look forward to continuing our work on behalf of the nation's small businesses. With that, we end this forum. Thank you very much. And to all the members, incredible participation. I'm very proud. Thank you.